Meeting to order. The Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to do a quick introduction. My name's Larry Graydon. I'm farm with my family in Winona County. Sheree?
Sheree Hales. I live in Wiscoy Township.
Margaret?
Margaret Walsh. I'm a Winona resident, and I have a family that on both sides were farmers, so I have a little knowledge.
And Phil?
Phil Schwantz from Mount Vernon Township, farmer.
Okay, let's have approval of the agenda. Everybody's looked at the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda
Amend the agenda.
to include Ms. Nuttall giving us a presentation on our finding of facts sheet.
Ms. Nettles, our staff attorney, is going to include a couple directions for us, so that'll be part of the agenda, which will probably be next. So, motion made to accept the minutes with that amendment.
Accept the agenda.
Accept agenda, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Second?
I would second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Ms. Nettles, would you take the floor, please?
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page with where we're at with the findings of fact that we're trying to modify to make them more effective and efficient and helpful for you. So you should have two documents, one with the docket number at the top. The first petition ends in 01, second petition ends in 02. As we talked about last time, we have started putting in the staff analysis as to whether or not a criteria has been met. These are not binding for you at this point. These are drafts, and then one of the thoughts that I had as I was sitting over there a few moments ago was that we will start stamping these draft when you get them, just so that it's clear that you are not bound by them, because I want to make sure that that is out there. You are welcome to modify these. You can change what the findings are, and we'll take care of that for you, but this is just a starting point. We also, based on our discussion from last time, did highlight in red anything that would be not consistent with the criteria required by the ordinance in order to approve. As you're aware, if any one of the criteria is not met, you cannot approve, or you should not approve a variance request. So we have started highlighting those just to draw your attention to them. But you do need to make sure you are taking the facts from if you intend to change those, whether you intend to change any that are not met to met, or whether you're intending to change any that are met to not met. You do need to make sure that we make the clear record of why you are doing that, what you are doing, what you're basing your decision on, the facts in the record that you're relying on to do that. And then we can change the language to meet your needs. So with that, any questions regarding the findings of fact sheets?
And just, there's, on the back, there's two, if we have duplicate.
Yes. Yep.
Duplicate more than one variance, they're on the back.
Correct. The way that this is structured is there's the findings for the criteria based on the petition. And then it says, based on the foregoing findings, the Winona County Board of Adjustment either approves or denies the petition for the following variance or variances. In this case, there are two on each, so they're numbered 1 and 2 on there. And then there's the recommended conditions from the staff report. You can change the conditions, you can change anything that's on here. If you agree with the document in its entirety, if you agree with the draft, we can also simplify the process, and you can simply adopt the findings as proposed rather than having to go through each of the criteria and discuss them. So hopefully that simplifies things on some of the less complicated variance requests.
So Stephanie, like this first one that's up, you have in red is not in harmony.
Correct.
And I agree with that. It's not in harmony. If it was in harmony, you wouldn't have to be here for a variance. So now how am I supposed to change that into a not?
If you believe that it is not, if that the correct factual statement is not, you shouldn't be changing it.
But we're not answering the yes or no's anymore.
No, we're not answering yes or no's.
That's what the difference is. We're listing these criteria
Yes.
without answering yes or no.
Correct.
So that's the,
We're looking at it as a whole.
yes.
So,
But if there's any that you disagree with, you can discuss any one of the criteria on its own, change the findings, change the way that it is written.
and regardless of how we go through these, should we go through all the facts of finding for all of them? Even if we come to the one that would not do a variance? Because people may want to know for corrections of their own property or their own decisions on how to do this, or?
However you would choose to do that. It's a little more flexible in that we don't have to go through each and every one and answer them without actually making sure there's a record for it, because essentially on some of these where, our past discussions have been, oh yeah, clearly that's met. That's not really making a finding. That's just saying, yes, it's met and not relying on the facts. This gives you some facts to rely on. If you agree with those, approve them and move on, or don't even discuss them and just approve everything except the ones that or go in and discuss only the ones that are of concern for you. And we can talk more if you need to, but, okay, thank you.
I think next is approval of the minutes. Did everybody look them over and have any questions or additions?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as is.
Motion by Margaret,
Second.
second by Phil. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Okay, staff presentation, feedlot-related setbacks.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Emily Bartuszek. I'm the County Feedlot Officer. And I was asked to put together a short presentation today because the Planning Department has noticed that we're seeing an increased amount of variance petitions and requests to parcel off property that involve feedlot-related setbacks. And so I just wanted to chat with you a little bit today about hopefully some things you can keep in the back of your head when you are looking at these variance requests, and just some things to keep in mind for approving or denying those requests. And this is, I'm going to try to keep it as informal as possible, so if you have questions or comments, just please feel free to interject. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about where in the county ordinance we see these feedlot setbacks. And this is in Chapter 8, which is the feedlot section, and then again in Chapter 10, which is the Agricultural Resource Conservation District section. And our feedlot-related setbacks all depend on the size of the feedlot facility. And so we have these three-tiered setbacks. The first one is that there is no setback, and those are for feedlots that have less than 10 animal units. The second one is a 500-foot setback, and that's for feedlots that have between 10 and 50 animal units. And then the most strict setback, which is 1,000 feet, and that's for feedlots that have over 50 animal units. A thing that I want to bring to your attention is that we measure this setback from the outermost component of the feedlot, whether that's a barn or an open lot area or manure storage. We start the distance there and then measure it to the edge of the dwelling. So that's that distance. I also want to reiterate that staff, when determining how big a feedlot facility is, we just don't look at their current feedlot registration. We take into account the capacity of the facility. So we look at their registration history since they started, and we take the maximum number of animal units recorded and define that as their capacity. We also look at their feedlot site history to see if we've ever received a feedlot closure form, and that would indicate that maybe they did some demolition on site or closed an outside lot, and that would reduce that site's capacity then.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
We've had controversy about how you set the setback. And, if there's a shed or a building, is there have to be a permanent building? How exactly?
It's basically any building that's used for the confinement or housing of livestock.
Any building at all? Okay. And that's where you,
It's the intent of the structure, so to speak.
Okay.
And then I also want to point to the picture that I've put in there. You'll notice that the arrow that shows that setback has points on both sides. And that's getting at that this is a reciprocal setback. So not only does a feedlot have to be X feet away from a dwelling, that dwelling has to be X feet away from the feedlot. So it goes in both directions for those two structures, if that makes sense. Another place that we see feedlot-related setbacks is from state standards. And we incorporate these into our zoning ordinance by referencing them. And so the first set is the state well code. The state of Minnesota outlines how far away a feedlot component needs to be from a private well. And this includes the operator of the feedlot. So I think the most strict setback would be for an unpermitted or a non-certified liquid manure storage. These were storages that were built before the year 2000 and may not have been designed by a licensed engineer at the time, but they have been grandfathered in, and they may pose an increased risk of pollution, and that's why we have the furthest distance from a private well to that structure. The other place we see feedlot-related rules when it comes to state standards is the feedlot rule, and that's Chapter 7020. And this chapter basically establishes the setbacks of a feedlot to environmental features. So we're talking, a feedlot has to be at least 300 feet away from a sinkhole. A feedlot needs to be at least 1,000 feet away from a community water supply. And then along with that comes restrictions for when a feedlot is located in floodplain or shoreland. So that's where we get that language. So now I'm going to move into the considerations that I hope that you keep in the back of your mind when you're looking at these petitions. And these aren't in any particular order. But the first one that I listed is the conservation of farmland. And we see this phrase throughout our comprehensive plan for the county, that we should be making decisions that protect and enhance agriculture in our area. Obviously, when we put more acreage out of production, we may be making a negative decision according to our comp plan. Another thing we see in our comprehensive plan is the need to protect water quality. And so when we think water quality, I think of, rivers, lakes, and streams, but we also need to consider our groundwater quality. And so if we have a lot of development or people living close to feedlots, there may be an increased risk of groundwater contamination. So we need to just keep more distance so that there's enough distance for the treatment of any potential runoff. Another consideration that I hope you keep with you is the need to minimize nuisances. When it comes to livestock operations, they're not odor-free, and sometimes they can be noisy, and just regular operations can cause dust and traffic. And so by giving people plenty of space, hopefully we can minimize those nuisances of everyday operation. Another thing that I don't think about all the time, but it's definitely a consideration that you should think about, is disease prevention. In the spring of the year, folks that raise poultry get really nervous about avian flu. And there's, really legitimate concerns when it comes to the spread of disease, and not just from humans to livestock, but also livestock to humans. So keeping those setbacks in place will hopefully prevent any disease spread. And lastly, and one that you probably think about on a regular basis, is how do we protect property values? We certainly don't want to diminish the value of our feedlot facilities or someone's residential acreage. So please keep that in mind. My last talking point is on the Right to Farm Act, and we have this in our ordinance. We cite it as a state statute, but it's something that doesn't always come to the front of the table, and it's basically protection for folks who farm. And what this act says is that if you're an agricultural operation and you've been doing so for at least 2 years, you're located in an ag-zoned area, you are compliant with local, state, and federal laws, and you use generally accepted ag practices, you can't be claimed or identified as a nuisance. So what does that mean? Well, if I go and buy property out in the rural area, and my neighbor is a sheep farmer who's been there for 25 years, and I'm out doing my own thing and I notice that it smells, so I call the feedlot officer and she comes out and does some air testing, and we look at the data and there aren't any exceedances of air quality standards. So that basically means that, they're meeting the criteria set forth by our local, state, and federal rules, but there's still a nuisance, a stone odor that bothers me. Well, I may not have any legal ramifications for correcting that because of the Right to Farm Act. So it's important that people who may not be familiar with ag, operations that are moving out to the rural area are aware of this, that there are nuisances that they may have to deal with. Well, that's all I have for you this afternoon, so if you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them.
I do have one question, Amy. Now, one of the things that are on the docket today is the building of a new feedlot with less than 10 animal units. So is it up to the owner of the property to approach, I don't know what, ASCS office or you to get it? Whatever their building is going to be designed to meet the parameters?
Right, so following the decision of that petition, then staff can provide them a feedlot registration form. And so that will allow them then to be a registered feedlot, will know their address, how many animals that they're going to be keeping, what kind of feedlot components they have on their site, and then they'll also be incorporated into our inspection schedule so that they get visited on a regular basis.
Question, if there's a 10 or less animals, 50 to 100, whatever, it comes to be, and there's part of the recommendation that we take as part of a variance, does that number stay with that property forever, just like any variant? Like if you say they can only have 50 to 100 animals?
I would
then they
assume
can
so.
never-
Yeah.
they can never legally, so anyone that buys that property anytime in the future could not change that?
Unless they come back.
Unless they come back
Right.
for another variance.
Correct.
But that would be the standard for that property.
Yes, that's how I would understand.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, sure,
Emily,
yes.
is this possible that you could forward this
Absolutely.
to not only this, but to planning?
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to the petitions. The first petition ending in 02, is that the one? Oh, here it is, 01, is by Chad Pike of Minnesota City. A variance to allow a 34-foot front yard setback between the center line of Stewart Valley Drive and a proposed building instead of the required 65 feet. And a second variance to allow a side yard of 5 feet, I'm assuming that's feet, and instead of the required 20 feet, pursuant to the Winona County zoning ordinance. Should we open the public hearing?
Staff presentation first, maybe?
Yeah,
Chuck?
I'm glad you're here, Margaret.
I-
Margaret is the vice chair, and she keeps me on line here. Staff, would you have a presentation on this, please?
Yes, we would. This is the Chad Pike variance application. Why is this variance needed? It was kind of gone over, but it's for the setbacks, and it's for 65 feet. It would be the setback from the road, but they're requiring it at 20. And I guess it should be discussed, there's two options here. So the 20 is the less of the two, and then there's another setback that's 5 feet. So I'll go over, there's two options, and he prefers option 2. And maybe I'll go forward, but, so this is option 1. So this one is off to the side of the house, and the side setback is in good shape, but there would be a 25-foot from the side yard, or from the road setback. And then the option 2, which is he's preferring, is gonna be very close to the property line, and it's gonna be 5 feet from the side yard, and then 34 feet from the center line. But during this presentation, because he's preferring option number 2, I'm referring to option number 2 most of the time. And this is a larger area where where it's located. It's off of Highway 248, and it's back in the Stewart Valley Drive. I'll be showing you a video a little bit later showing both options 1 and 2 and where they're going to be located. As I go through the staff report, some of the things why it didn't meet the requirements is that setbacks are set for safety and health. And during the comprehensive plan, there's a strong emphasis on maintaining the agricultural land, which this would not. And then the third one is the practical difficulty. It's not real well established for building a shed. So then I'll go to the video. I'm going to be showing, starting out, looking mainly towards the north and going to the west and looking at option number 1. So this one, yeah. So we're looking basically at option 1 there. So this one would be closer to the road setback. Now we're looking towards the west. And I think on the staff report, there's a mention of a shed that's already across the street. That one's 57 feet approximately from the setback of the road. Now we will be looking towards the east, and this is where option number 1 is. Option number 1 is obviously it's a flatter area, but the setback from the side yard is very limited at 5 feet, but it is further away from the road. And then we're going to be looking back at the house, looking towards the north, and then looking at option 1 again from a different angle. And that's the end of my presentation.
Could you just go back and show us the difference between option 1 and 2? You might have said option 1 twice.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, this is option 1. It's off to the side of the road. Off to the side of the house. It's closer to the road, but the side setback would be met. Option number 2, the one that he prefers, is going to be closer to the side yard by 5 feet, but further from the road with 34 feet. Option 2 is a little bit flatter slopes, and this is the option that he said he preferred in the letter.
I'm confused. Are we the petition for option 1 or option 2?
For option 2.
So
Yeah,
we should
because-
probably just talk about option 2 then, right?
He presented both options in the, during his variance application. That's why I'm addressing both of them.
Okay.
But he says in his letter that he prefer option 2 because it would be easier to build. I think he mentioned $16,500 less to build in option 2 than option 1.
I don't know about you guys, but I would prefer if you would walk over there and show us exactly.
And just for clarity, Chuck, could we know what footage for the neighbors as opposed to the road is what you're talking about, right?
Right.
Okay, and just give us the numbers on both those options, so from those pictures, so I'm clear on that.
Okay. So, this is option 2, the one that he prefers. This represents the property line. He wants to get as close as 5 feet from that property line. This building here, option 2, would be 34 feet from the center line. Option 1, the side yard would be met. The road setback would be closer at 25 feet. It's more difficult because of the slopes. There is approximately 12% here, and then back here is 25%. And this is option 2 again over here. Option 2 would also require a driveway. So this would be where option 2 would be, this is option 1.
Thank you.
And could you point out where the drain field is, septic and drain field?
The drain field, according to his maps, is about right here.
And what is setback for a building from the drain field then?
20 feet from the structure of the absorption area.
Okay, thank you.
But on this map that you've drawn, or that I'm referring to in our packet, if my memory serves me correctly, you're showing 8 feet. 8 feet 6 inches between, well, that would just be the corner of the drain field though, I guess, huh?
Yeah, and that's his drawing. So,
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Who determines the center of the road?
I believe that would be Fort Rock Road, Stewart Valley Drive, around Center Township Road. And I'd have to check, but my understanding would be is that the right of way would be 33 feet. I don't believe we have any authority to grant anything closer than 34 feet to the center of the township road.
Being that we're just dealing with 12 inches, that's why I'm wondering who determines where's the center of this road, because
It's as traveled, so it's essentially just measuring it on spot with the tape measure and rolling out 33 feet. So whatever the setback is, that's all you do is drive all on site.
And that's the planning department that's given us those numbers. Okay. As opposed to the township or anybody that maintains.
Are we ready to open the public hearing now? Can I have a motion?
so moved.
Motion by
second
Phil,
that.
second by Sheree. Open the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Public hearing is now open. If anybody wishes to speak for or against this petition, this Chad Pike petition, please come forward now. State your name and where you live.
My name is Pat Dernan. I own the farm and property to the west of him. I have no problem with the building being on Site 1, if you can meet the setbacks. Right now, it's a 33-foot right-of-way for the township. So what he's got proposed is taking 8 feet of the township's right-of-way and putting the corner of the building there. It's not off of the township's right-of-way. If he can push it back, meet the setbacks, I'm all for him. Build a building on that side toward me, and the valley still looks nice, and everything kind of stays in focus the way it is. We're within 1 mile of the river, so we have standards that we're supposed to meet with the, all the land out there. And it's stricter than when you get away from that mile. Well, they want to protect the bluffs, and they want to take care of everything. Well, this is the valley. If you drive up the valley with the option number 2, the first thing you're going to see is the building sitting out there like it's on an island. And the beauty of the valley will be diminished. The value of the properties next door, I think, will go down myself. But I have no problems with it being on my side to the west if you can meet those setbacks, what they are. And that's why we live with them with everything else that we do. Across the street, there is a garage that's, I didn't know was 57 feet off of the road. But when it was put in, it's put in on our side of the property line, a piece of it. Our property line runs through their garage. And we've got an agreement when it falls down, burns down, whatever happens, it's filed, then it'll go forward and go where it should be. But we've already got one it's over the property line. And I'm all for property rights and for them to go on and everything be fine. But I think the option number 2 really hurts the whole valley when you take a look at where it's going to sit. When you looked up the valley and you saw that beautiful valley there, and all of a sudden on an island out there you'll have that sitting there. My son lives out there, I don't. I own the property, so he'll have to look at it, and you can decide what you think is, is best for it. And a few of the neighbors are here, and they'll have to look at it more than I do, so I'll let them, say what they have to say. But I'm against the second site. The first site, if he wants to move it back and meet the, your request and the distances, I'm all for him. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak for or against this petition?
Hi, my name is Brenna Crawford. I live at 25565 Stewart Valley Drive, which is directly across from Mr. Pike's property. I agree with everything that Mr. Durnan just expressed. Having it back by the house is definitely preferred. Where he's talking, option number 2, basically, I would walk out my front door and the structure would be right there, essentially closer to my house than it would be, that the house that it actually belongs to. And I do have concerns also because the preferred option by Mr. Pike adds another access point on the road and a big turnaround area to be able to access the structure. It would be nice to see the existing driveway taken advantage of more. And I definitely agree that having it set way out there would change the character of the road as you're driving through. Everybody's pretty set back. It's a very large structure too. I think that covers most of, that is my shed that is 57 out. As far as I know, it's been there for decades, probably originally when the house was built in the 70s. And it would not be replaced. I would not ask to put one there. It doesn't look so bad because it's on the end of the road also, on the dead end. So if you have any questions too about that shed, let me know.
The size of that shed is pretty small.
It is small. It's less than 9, I think it's 875 square feet. And the proposed shed is 2,000. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak for or against this proposal, petition?
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Kronebusch. I live directly to the east of Chad, and it's our property that is going to be affected by the option 2, which is being preferred, the 5-foot distance from the property line I'm on that side. Me and my husband, we both understand that Chad's options are very limited on where to build. We're on a hillside. I mean, the options are limited, so we understand where he's coming from. We have spoken with Chad about the options very casually and briefly prior to getting all of this information in the mail, and he let us know ahead of time that he was planning on making a building, and he asked, our thoughts, and at the time in very casual conversations, no, we have no issues, down the road. Our plan eventually is to kind of do a similar thing next to our house. So we know exactly where he's coming from. There were no specific dimensions at the time. He did mention that he was going to put through a variance. Me and my husband didn't think too much about it, and I know my husband was out mowing lawn and saw the flags that were in the lawn markers, and later that day he had called and spoke to Chad and said, gosh, that looks pretty tight, and asked, is 10 feet doable? Can you give us just a little breathing room, wiggle room? But we also understand that he is kind of in a tight spot with the septic, with the drain field that's coming down as well. If we could get a little bit more room from the property line, that would be ideal. That 10 feet, I think, isn't an outrageous thought or request or asking. Other than that, the only other concerns that we have would be if and when down the road we decide to sell our property, which is next to this land, would that, and we don't have a crystal ball, but would that reduce our value having a structure sitting where it's at? So other than those, I don't have any other concerns. Any questions for me?
Just for clarification, when the packet of information that I have states that the Cronenbushes didn't have any concerns with the 5-foot setback, and you're telling me possibly you do.
I don't think and my husband's not here, he wasn't able to make it, and I know they had some conversations that I wasn't part of, but we were okay within, not the 20 feet we were okay with, but it wasn't defined at the time 5 feet was going to be the set mark at that time that I can recall. But once we saw the flags out there, it just kind of was an eye opener that, oh, that is pretty close. And, close to one person, it's perspective, 1 foot might be close to somebody compared to, 20 feet to somebody. And a lot of that wasn't specific at the time that the casual conversations were having, just between neighbors.
What are your thoughts about option 1?
Option 1, we have no problems with option 1.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Could I pose that same question to Ms. Crawford about option 1? How would you feel about that?
Option 1 is definitely the better option from where I sit right across the street, but I also would like to see the setback withheld and have it pushed back. But that position as opposed to the other side way down by the road.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
Would anybody else like to speak for or against? Please state your name and where you live.
Chad Pike, I'm the guy that we're all talking about. So when I first took a look at this, I worked with Chuck and Eric, and I talked to Doug Cronenbush, and I actually called up Rolling Stone Township and talked to them, how do I go about this, and really looked at it. And they gave me some guidance, and they said, what we want you to do is take a look at the closest you can get to the road is, I think it's like 33 feet, but so I said, okay, I'll set it back 34 foot and see what I can get, if I can get my shed in there. And I guess the whole reason why we moved out to the country was, for a shed, because we have stuff, and I like to woodwork and other stuff. So when I started going down this journey, I guess, I have a couple of issues. I don't know if you guys seen the snowmobile trailer that I have, but in a snowmobile trailer, the trailer's actually fairly low. And so going up a steep driveway, which I have a fairly steep driveway, I can't even back my trailer up the driveway without it bottoming out. Option 1 is not a very good option at all, because I'd have to dig out so far down into the ground that the roof would darn near be on the backside into the ground. So the grade is pretty steep for my shed to go in there. So that's like, if you try to push that back, it really doesn't work, because the grade would be higher than what the roof would be. So then you'd have to put big concrete buttresses and stuff in. So option 1 was really just an option to say, hey, I did look at this spot, but financially for me, it doesn't work. And I've got the cable TV going the cable going, and my power is going right over option 1. So outside of the buttresses and the new electrical lines, I had to kind of look somewhere else. So that's when I approached Cronenbusch's, and I talked to Doug about that. And I'm flexible enough, you know, if they wanted, you know, 10-foot distance, I told Doug a week ago, yeah, I'll work with you, you know. I mean, the size of the shed, I really want to maintain the 50-foot, but the depth of, you know, if I had to go down a 35-foot, you know, to make things right, I'm fine with that, you know. So anyways, that's why I'm going for option one. In both options, I would have to put a driveway anyhow, because if I put that shed in, I'd have to put a big turnaround there anyways. And all of that dirt work would have to go down. It would probably cause more of an issue with drainage if it was down like that, just because how the slopes work. The sloping of the back of the yard would also be an issue, because that's a pretty steep slope. That's a steep slope right in here. And so if I put a building right there, this water doesn't, it gets bound up here, and then it'd have to go all the way around, which could be an issue. So I wanted you know, the flat spot's probably the best spot to put it at this point. I understand that when I went through this with Rolling Stone Township, the issues were safety, why you couldn't go 34 or less than 34 foot. It's a safety concern. And so what I did was I actually looked and see if you could have a sight line through here, and you can have a sight line. You got to understand that there's like hardly any traffic that ever comes past my place. It's basically the Durdens here, or tractors. So nobody's speeding past there 45 miles an hour at all, hardly ever. So safety shouldn't be an issue. Now I know that there was mention of the size of the building, and I know that that's a concern for some people. I don't know if there's a size limit in Winona County for a building or not. Nobody's told me that, so. The beauty of I thought it was mentioned, and I don't, from our point, I guess, we don't see it, we see this way. They see the outside, they look at our house anyways. And they got trees in front of their house. So, yeah, I'm more than willing to make the shed smaller, and I think Chuck and I can work that through during a building permit process.
Your preference is number two?
For sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the other one's just economically not possible for me. So.
Any questions for Mr. Pike? Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak for or against this petition? I legally have to say that 3 times. Does anybody else wish to speak for or against this petition? And number 3, does anybody else wish to speak for or against this petition? Hearing none, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
By Margaret, second by Cherie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Okay, now I'll get to decide. Go through our criteria, huh? I think I'll read this just because variance may be granted only when it is in harmony with the general purposes and the intent of the official control and consistent with the comprehensive plan, and where the strict enforcement of county zoning controls will result in practical difficulty. Winona County's zoning ordinance 5.6.2 provides that a variance from the regulations of the ordinance shall not be granted unless the Board of Adjustment makes findings of fact based on the evidence presented and the following standards. We have 9 things. 8, thank you. 8 variance requests in harmony to go through, and the Board of Adjustment consider each of these elements, and if any one is not in the majority of support, then the criteria for granting a variance per the statute has not been met, and a variance as requested should be denied.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Just of the 9 properties that are out there, are they all within the same acreage? Like, we're talking about almost 6 acres there for Chad, and the neighbors are all those other 9 in that category, or?
Pretty similar, I think Paths is larger, I mean, it's considerable acreage as you go more to the west, but some of those smaller residential lots are about 5 acres.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
If I can add in, ours is probably the smallest of the properties out there, and we have 3 acres.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to get a-
Okay, number 1, any other comment, Margaret?
No, thanks.
Number 1, the variance request is not in harmony with the intent and purpose of the ordinance, and this one, the staff has produced a document that says the setbacks established in the ordinance are to provide for the long-term health and safety of the present and future, and I'm going to emphasize future, residents of adjoining properties, and encroachment into those setbacks is not in harmony with the intent and purpose of the ordinance. Any discussion on that one?
I have to say I'm in agreement with the staff on that.
Number 2, the variance request is not consistent with the comp plan. Well, obviously, it's not, or it wouldn't be requesting a variance, right?
Mr. Chair, just for the record, that's not quite an accurate statement. The comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance do provide for variances in order to address any reasons why we might be able to deviate from them.
Okay. That's our legal counsel, keeps us out of trouble. Number 3, the applicant has not established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the official control and purposes to use the property in a reasonable manner. Staff says, although the petitioners have provided information indicating that the location of the septic field and the presence of utilities in the area, the structure is not a residence or an essential building for a farming operation. Any comments on that?
It's not a resident, it's not for farming,
Right.
so.
Well, I would like to add, though, that, there are practical difficulties in the property, clearly, with the slopes and where things are set up, as mentioned, and having a storage building. I mean, I think a lot of us do have storage buildings, so, granted, it is not agricultural in nature, but I just would like to kind of make that note.
Forgive me, I didn't do my homework like I should have. What was the proposed size of this building again? Wasn't it 40 by 60 or
40 by 50, yeah, I believe.
40?
40 by 50?
Mr. Pike, could you answer that?
40 by 50.
40 by 50? Okay.
And how tall of sidewalls are you talking?
Sidewalls are probably gonna be at the 12 or 14 foot. I gotta figure out what I'm trying to do.
Well, let's go through the rest of them. Number 4, the variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property and not created by the owners of the property since enactment of the ordinance. Yes, there are steep slopes in the rear of the house, and there are utilities and a septic that must be avoided for any additional structures on the property. Now, one comment I have about that one, oftentimes, if staff could help me out here, when you build, they'd like to see a second site for a septic if the first one fails. how might that tie into this permit process?
That provision was required after 1996. So it may be a case that this area, most of these houses were built prior to 1996, so they were able to just come up with one primary site. But good proper planning would say, yes, do you have a reserve site for when something happens 20, 30, 40 years down the road, that you have identical square footage to fall back onto for replacement drain field. It is, I guess, a good consideration.
I mean, this board looks at a lot of variance requests for septics that are too close to this or that or the other thing. And maybe the shed is gonna go where there might be a backup septic system. Is that a fair statement? Any other comment on number 4? Number 5, the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality nor substantially impair property values or the public health, safety, or welfare. Staff says 4 of the 9 dwellings located in the area already have accessory structures, so the essential character would not be altered. And Sheree spoke, she has a shed, maybe we can, no, just
That's
kidding.
true, I do.
Is it half empty?
I built mine 2 stories high, so the footprint is small.
Well, and we've heard testimony that that could be challenged as far as the character and property values and the closer to the driveway, have we not? Or to the road?
From the neighbors you're talking about. Yeah.
Number 6, economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. Although economic considerations were mentioned as a consideration regarding which option the petitioner would like to pursue, either option proposes would require the requested variances, so cost alone is not the practical difficulty. Any comments on that one? Number 7, the variance can be alleviated by reasonable method other than a variance, and is the minimum variance which would alleviate the practical difficulty. The staff commented the variance would not be needed if the petitioner does not build a large garage. The building of any structure on the site would add significant practical difficulties, not alleviate them. Any comments on that one? Number 8, the request is not a use variance and shall not have the effect of showing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district, permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation, or permit standards lower than those required by state law. Staff's comment on ARC district. Could you define ARC?
Resource.
Okay, I should have knew that.
You want the purpose or just?
No, just what that word, what those letters, abbreviations meant.
Rattle off a paragraph, but no, as Stephanie said, agricultural resource.
Okay. The Conservation District allows for construction of residential additions and structures on the parcels and structures on the parcel when complying with local, state, and federal floodplain regulations. This site is not within the floodplain. Okay, based on the following or foregoing findings, the Winona County Board of Adjustment does what? What's your pleasure? Anyone want to discuss any of the rest of them again, or what do you want to do?
Well, for myself, I'm hearing the neighbors backpedaling a little bit on the 5 feet. It's, you know, it's required 20 feet. the variance is stating 5 feet. The owner of the property next to him now is saying, well, maybe 10 feet. I don't know.
My comment would be, we can only vote on what's being proposed in the petition. We can't vote on, or can we amend it to great,
The draft findings are yours to amend as you see fit.
Right, but the actual request is 5 feet.
You can always ask the petitioner.
We can always ask them, okay. So that's not set in stone, is what you're saying. We could tweak that, okay.
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
So when you review the individual findings of facts, and state reasons if they're going a different direction, that could be handled, or other things could be added to the conditions part at the end.
Right.
So there's a way to do that.
Margaret, you were gonna say something, or you?
If we were to deny this petition, and the petitioner wanted to come back with a different plan, they would not have to pay another, if they had a new variance, would they have to, can we waive the fee in the future? There you go. If we deny it today, and they rework it and come back, if they need to, or maybe they'll rework it. I mean, I'm just wondering about the,
Does the staff time get to decrease correspondingly, or will we be doing the same exhibits, the same paperwork, the same photocopying, and the same staff time?
and how much was the petitioner paying to bring this here? Do we have a record of that? $550 for the two.
Yes.
Mhm. Thank you, just wondered. So, financial is not a condition we look at, so.
Go ahead, Sheree.
I feel like we have not been in agreement with all of these, so technically this isn't met. And Ms. Nuttall could correct me on this. I think I recall from Planning Commission, someone has stepped back from their application to continue working on it, so that they didn't have to go through the fee again. I believe that has happened. With, what do you call it, withdraw their application to continue working on it?
That's an option. It could be tabled to allow them to amend. There are options along those lines.
Mhm.
A final decision of either approval or denial today would mean that there would have to be a full reapplication. But anything less than that would give the ability to modify.
So we would have to table our vote, is what you're saying, for a future. Mhm. All right,
What
thank you.
about this, does the 60-day rule come into play then, or not?
We would need to provide the appropriate notice and handle things with the 60-day rule.
Or a letter from the applicant requesting that the 60-day time period be waived in order to make a revised application.
Well, I'm personally could not vote to pass this variance today in the way it's presented.
Either one?
No, neither one. I just don't see the practical difficulty. I just don't see the garage sitting out by the road, and I don't see you can't have a structure 5 feet from your neighbors. Maybe you can, but 50 years from now, or 40, when you need to put siding on that structure and you gotta set up scaffolding, I've done enough construction, I know you can't even set up a ladder. So that's just doesn't make any sense. It's asking for problems in the future with maybe not these folks, but the ones that own it after they're gone. As far as the septic field, we've had enough of these come before us that I think people need a second site for a septic field, and if you're gonna build a shed on it, and then we'll get them back, or somebody will 20 years from now and say, oh, by the way, our septic failed and we don't have a place to put one, now what do? We gotta grant a variance so that they can squeeze it in someplace. Or they do a mound system, which I'm told is very expensive. So for all of those reasons, I can't support this, but somebody has to make a motion, or if you wanna delay or demand, that's, I guess I'm asking my board members, what do you wanna do?
The only thing that I will say is, number one option was talked. I did have conversation with the township supervisor, and he's not in favor of getting in 20 feet from the road. So you'd be into the road right away, too far. So if he's going to withdraw this and rework and go back to option one, it would be a waste of time unless if he can back it up into the hill and get away from the road. It's because of the input that the township supervisors have given me.
Well, as much as I hate to, have to restrict people's, what they do with their own land, I would make a motion to deny both of these options and both of these variances. I just think there's too many problems in both areas that are just not working consistently for me or the neighbors or the area.
Would that motion also include an adoption of the findings of fact as presented?
Yes.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Yes, I would second that.
Motion by Margaret, second by Cherie, I'm sorry. Okay, all in favor of the motion to deny the variance as presented before us today, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? This petition is denied, or these two petitions are denied. Okay, the second petition,
Okay, for him. You gotta read this. You gotta read this.
oh, I'm sorry, let me finish what I'm supposed to do here, I forgot. There is an appeal process for this decision. All decisions by the Board of Adjustment in granting or in hearing appeals from any administrative order, requirement, decision, or determination shall be final except that any aggrieved person or persons or any department, board, or commission of the jurisdiction of the state shall have the right to appeal within 30 days after receipt of notice of the decision to the district court in the county to which the land is located on questions of law and fact. Any party that would like to submit an appeal to the decision just rendered in this public hearing must do so to the district court. The planning department is not responsible for filing the appeal. I will grant your question, sir.
So, explain, I have to go to the district court to get an appeal?
I think you could do that. I think you could reapply, bring something different that we could work with more. That would be my suggestion, but I'm just a layman on this. We have others that are more skilled in this area. They're all three sitting over there.
I guess I'm looking for some guidance. I gotta do something.
Your two options are to appeal the decision and basically argue that the record notice of the decision that was made, or you can work with the planning department to see if you can come up with an alternative that might meet the required criteria.
And so the required criteria right now is find a secondary, like if I put a secondary mound system, we can put that, so I could find a spot for that.
We will get you a copy of the findings that were just made today. It will kind of explain why the criteria that were not met were found that way. And then we can work with the planning to make sure that those criteria are met on the application.
Okay, our second. Are you gonna say something? Our second ends in number, the 02, findings of fact. This is where's my petitions?
Page 37, I guess.
there.
Christie and Amanda Mast are asking for a variance to allow relief from the following provisions of the Winona County's ordinance, a variance to allow a building site established in Class 2 and Class 3 soil types instead of the required Class 4. And I think Eric is ready to give us his overview of that.
And the second variance.
The second one is a variance to allow the establishment of a feedlot within agriculture resource conservation district and the shoreland natural feature overlay district pursuant to 8.5.1.2 of the Winona County zoning ordinance. Go ahead, Eric.
Right. What you have in front of you with 9/21/17-2 is two separate distinct variance requests. So we do need two motions and two votes because they are two separate issues. The findings have been modeled that they are reflective of both, as well as staff's analysis. The first request is to allow a new dwelling on a class type 2 and 3 instead of 4 through 8. The second is just to establish a feedlot site due to the fact that it's in the shoreland district. As Emily gave a presentation, our ordinance does not allow the establishment of any feedlots in shoreland. There's processes for fix-ups or working on existing feedlots in shoreland, but to create a new feedlot site, it's essentially a prohibition. We haven't had many requests such as this, so this is a first in a long time where, based on some unique circumstances, it's a smaller feedlot in nature. It's something that this board can consider for a petition. In your packet, you probably have better exhibits than some of these maps. So there's one new one that I added. But this essentially shows the 40 acres. The petitioners have acquired 40 acres in which they wish to homestead that acreage. This map shows the shoreland as well as the floodplain. The blue ribbon is the Zone A, or the 1% floodplain. There'd be another section, another chapter of regulations if anything was proposed within that blue floodplain area. The green shading is representing 300 feet from the stream, which is shoreline. On that map, it essentially sketches a location of a larger metal building which the applicants wish to erect. First, that would be for a multi-purpose use. It would be for residential purposes, as well as, I believe, grain storage, as well as for some animals to all be under one roof. They do have plans down the road to build a house eventually on the site too, to replace the multi-purpose structure that would be up front.
Eric, using your pointer, can you just outline their 40 acres? It is that rectangle, correct?
It's 40 acres. This is somewhat distorted because of putting it on PowerPoint, but this would be the 40-acre segment.
And you're saying they want to, okay, sorry, I didn't know.
And the green area is
It's
the,
shoreland.
okay.
Yep. So you can see, the next map, I know there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts with this, but I'll try to cover everything so you have a pretty good handle on it. And then the applicants here, they can say whatever I missed or maybe misconveyed.
Just real quick, though, you're talking about this structure is going to be replaced with the house later on?
Yes, I think then it wouldn't be replaced, it would be repurposed at some point. Repurposed.
So the building would still stay?
It would still stay.
Okay. Just to clarify that.
I excuse my poor, I guess, color shading on this, but this is the way our GIS is set up. This 40 acres, again, would be this area. This is looking at the acreage when you throw prime soils on it, as well as shoreland. You can barely make out the different colors of green, but the darker green is prime soils, and then the lighter green is showing the shoreland. So I guess I just wanted to, in that exhibit, show how much of that 40 acres is affected, just by two issues in our zoning ordinance.
It's not real clear, Eric, but we'll go with it.
Okay. Any questions, just let me know on this. Again, here's the 40 acres, and this is, I guess, highlighting the prime soils. And the building site, again, is in this area right here, what they've selected. You have 3 groups. You have 1/3 of an acre, you got 3 1/4 acre, and you got 14.5 acres. Of that 40 acres, roughly 18 acres is considered prime, thus it's 45% of the parcel is prime soils. Our ordinance says that for a proposed building site, it needs to be less than 40% prime. If it was less than 40% prime, they could build anywhere on it, but to the fact that we're taking 40 acres in consideration, it's over 40%. For choosing to build on a segment that's prime, they are bound by that standard as far as prime soils. Again, this is one that's not in your book, but I just wanted to add this. And this is LiDAR. This is showing 2-foot contours of that site. The stream, which is located in this profile, I believe, I just have to walk up closer. Looks like it's around the 1070 elevation. Where their site is located is at the 1090 plus elevation. So what we're talking about is that this field or this building location is roughly sitting 20 some feet above the riverine floodplain stream valley below, and you'll see, I guess, a better idea of the site when I when I show you the video.
Eric, and what is the elevation on the other side, opposite of the building site? I live by a stream and that flooded once.
It goes up considerably.
So it's steeper on the other side.
1100, 1110, 1120. There's a pond in the northeastern part, and yes, it's
steeper on the other side. Okay, thank you.
Also, in doing a review, this is late into the process, so we're doing our review, but it's also modeled as a high arc probability area, so the county will have to initiate a phase 1 survey with this based on that it is in a higher probability, which I guess, I remember we had one about 1.5 years ago when they were replacing a bridge. We had another project with a land alteration, and we did have somebody from the University of La Crosse come down and do a phase 1 just to make sure that there's no significant villages or burial grounds associated with that site.
Archaeological. Yeah, okay. Here.
And here's a video. This video footage is in regards to Board of Adjustment item 92117 number 2, as well as Planning Commission agenda item PC 92117 number 8. The petitioners, Christy and Amanda Mast, are seeking 2 variances and 2 conditional use permits for a proposal involving the construction on a 40-acre parcel located in Section 28 of Saratoga Township. Currently just off of the Township Road, that is Old Fort Road. This is the view looking to the west, to the north, and in that direction would be the intersection of Old Fort Road and Cocker Drive, right at that point. The view looking back to the south along the Township Road. Petitioners wish to initially construct the building. I guess as far as the size, refer to your staff report. I believe it's 80 by 36 in this location. There would be another structure eventually for a house, but to initially construct that structure, there would be elements of the zoning ordinance that require a conditional use permit. The first part being that if it's a dwelling within the shoreland designated overlay district, that is only allowable by a conditional use permit. I believe the building site would be approximately 140 feet, 150 feet from measuring on the GIS system from the ordinary high water mark of the shoreland corridor. You can see that this is kind of a elbow or bend that mainly comprised of woodland, and below this wood line is a grade change that goes down to a stream, a tributary of Money Creek. So 300 feet out, which is most of what you see in this field, as well as a considerable amount located on the east side of the property, would be shoreland. And the second part of that conditional use permit is that if they have a building that's intended to have any animals whatsoever as a feedlot, that is additionally a conditional use permit requirement. The variances that the applicants are seeking are to allow development on prime soils. The petitioners have looked at the 40 acres. There is other cropland on the northern part and on the eastern side, on the other side of this wooded ravine. However, those would present issues as well. Everything from a feedlot setback located to the north, to prime soils, to where a pond area is, and the topography wouldn't be favorable for that site. The second variance is to allow a feedlot established in the shoreland district, which I guess essentially the intent is not to allow intensive agricultural feedlot operations within shoreland. That would be new feedlots. In this case, the applicants have indicated that they do need a handful of animals for basic everyday farming purposes to homestead this 40 acres, involving horses, I believe some goats or sheep, and potentially some poultry. So, in order to allow that, they would need a variance. Staff has proposed some conditions as far as everything from the design of the building, where the runoff might be generated, to the size or cap of 10 animal units, essentially to address that proposal. You can see there is some degree of slope from where the vehicle's parked to the lower lying areas in this area. The sensitive features do follow around in this manner. And also, according to looking at the archaeological probability map, this area is considered high, and mainly due to its upper setting on the shelf that sits above a floodplain shoreland area. A condition would be also that Winona County would have to conduct a Phase 1 survey. The only comments I'd have regarding that is there was one not done too shortly ago, a short distance from here. There was a county road project and a contractor involved with kind of a bridge replacement project, And I think that's probably not even about a mile away, probably less than that from this location here. Very similar setting. Staff has been in correspondence with the applicant as far as reaching out to Saratoga Township. I believe most of the town board are familiar with the request and most have looked at it. And the consensus was, from feedback from the applicant, was they would have no comments regarding the requests at this time. This should conclude the video footage for this petition. The only thing that I'd add is our water planner, Sheila. We looked at just the water impairment areas, I guess, for this. This is considered a unnamed tributary to Money Creek, but there are several Money Creeks in Winona County. This is one that is basically, I think, a reach for trout run. It actually goes to the Root River, and this particular area was not deemed impaired until further south as you get into Fillmore County. And I think that might have some other bearing if Kay wanted to add on to that, certainly could too, but we did take a look at that. We are, due to this, the second variance request being shoreland and feedlot related, that was something that might come up there too, just as far as water quality impacts and things like that. Staff has a recommended condition, and that we would want to see, I guess, basically how the animals would be, I guess, fenced or the enclosed area, and some type of manure management that they'd want to incorporate with that. Other than that, that is all that staff has at this time.
Is this an appropriate time to ask Emily a question, or would that be later?
We're pretty open here, go ahead.
Okay. For instance, 10 animal units might be, how many, a mix, it was suggested a mix.
Yeah, so a horse is 1 animal unit. A goat is 0.1 animal unit. So depending on the weight of the animal, that's how we base how many animal units worth. A mature dairy cow is 1.4. So if we're, proposing to cap their animal unit capacity at this site to 10, they'd be allowed up to 10 horses, up to 100 goats.
And poultry?
Poultry, oh man, we've got, depends on what kind of manure system you have, but generally we're talking like 0.003 to 0.005 for a chicken.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Did you guys have some questions for Eric?
I'm just curious to, what happens if you have the archaeological survey done and they find that there's artifacts there?
Then we might have to go to phase 2 or something of that nature, or it's a good question because we've never had that.
Done beforehand.
Yeah.
It's always after the
But
fact.
I think it gets into some federal issues where you can't build if it's a significant archaeological site. You're supposed to stop, try to.
So
figure
that
out-
could, in essence, stop everything if something was found.
Right. Yeah,
May or
some
may
odd
not,
reason.
depending, or there could be a search and it may delay it and later on, but, okay.
That's the risk of anybody, whether it's,
Right.
whether we've done a modeling or not, there's some federal.
Right, they can't, what I'm asking is they can't go on around it.
Right.
So that would be the step 1 before they'd even be able to start to build at all. So, yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman and board members, typically the University La Crosse staff that has been doing these has provided very minimal charges for the amount of time that may be going into them. So even though the county is footing the bill, $500 around that, it has been, and of course, that's still a lot of money, but I'm in a way surprised that they're able to do it for that little. So they're certainly being reasonable, with us, with our requests, and very timely as
So does the landowner pay that?
No. Number 6 says Winona County does.
Are we ready to open the public hearing?
Yes, I would so move.
Moved by Cherie, second by
Go ahead.
Margaret. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing is now open. Anybody present who wishes to speak for or against this petition, this mass petition, please step forward and state your name and where you're from. Does anybody wish to speak for or against the mass petition? State your name and step forward. I'm sorry, sir, I didn't hear you.
I think you pretty well spoke for us. It sounds good.
You're the mass?
Yes.
Okay. You want to introduce yourself at all, or no?
I think he covered everything.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I got to ask a third time now, so we don't break the rules. I guess I got to start over, maybe.
You're fine, just ask a third time.
Okay. Does anybody present wish to speak for or against this petition? Please come forward. This is the third and final call. Hearing none, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second by Phil. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The hearing is closed, and now we go to findings of fact. I'm just going to go to number 1. The variance request is in harmony with the intent and purpose of the ordinance. Staff comments, the petitioner's request is in harmony with the intent and purpose of the Agriculture and Resource Conservation Zoning District's purpose of protecting ag and ensuring ongoing viability of the resource because it would establish a new farmstead that would allow a farming family to live and work on their land without jeopardizing the viability of the agriculture in the area. Discussion on that. Number 2, the variance is consistent with the comp plan. Do I need to read that, or you folks read it?
You could read the analysis.
Although the petitioner's request would not be consistent with the avoidance of prime farmland, the structures would be on less desirable farmland, and the request is consistent with the comp plan support of preservation and promotion of ag lands and uses because the structures are farm-related ag buildings and a dwelling. Any comment on that one? Number 3, the applicant has established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the official control and purpose to use the property in a reasonable manner. Staff said the building location has been selected as the best option on the property that allows for relatively easy access and the least impact on prime soils and ag fields. Number 4, the variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property not created by owners of the property since enactment of the ordinance. Staff says the special conditions are the lack of Class 4 to Class 3 soils available for building site and the existence of floodplains, steep slopes, and feedlot setbacks. They were not created by the petitioners. Number 5, the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality nor substantially impair property values or the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity. Staff said the variance would allow for a farm dwelling and a farmstead that are similar in character to others in the vicinity, and the conditions would require compliance with regulations designed to protect public health, safety, and welfare in the vicinity. Number 6, economic conditions alone do not constitute practical difficulties, and staff said economic considerations were not mentioned as a part of the request. Number 7, the variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance, and as the minimum variance would alleviate the practical difficulty. Staff said the petitioner has considered several alternatives for the building locations, but a reasonable alternative does not appear to be readily available, and other options would also require variances. Number 8, the request is not a use variance and shall not have the effect of allowing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation or permit standards lower than those required by state law. And now I can say the ARC, because we all know what it means. District allows for construction of ag dwellings or buildings and accessory uses on the parcel. The proposed location is not located in a floodplain and does not lower the degree of flood protection. It says floor protection, but that must mean flood protection or less than state law standards. Now, as I understand it, there's 2 variances. We should probably talk about one and then the other. Is it?
We should go through the conditions as well.
I got a couple, yeah, I've got a question on the conditions. You have exceed 10 with a 1 after it. Is that just a typo on condition 4?
Yes.
It should be 10. Okay, is there any, is 10 the lowest we can go in animal units? Are those the
I think
standards?
0 to 10 is the lowest category, right?
Right, do we have to stay within those categories always? Is that a legal requirement? Can we say it's 8 or 6 or 12 or 15? Do we have an option on that we do, okay.
You don't like chickens, Margaret, or what?
I love chickens, so.
Okay, I don't know what the rest of you think, but I think that based on the lack of discussion on all these, maybe we could look at number 1 and say allowing a building site established on class 2 or 3 soil types instead of the class 4 would be something we're ready to approve or deny. Would I hear a motion to that effect?
I would move to approve that variance.
I'd second it.
Moved by Cherie, second by Margaret, to approve variance number 1, I'll call
With
it.
conditions?
With all of the conditions, of course, which we'll read if it's approved.
And adopting the draft of the findings of fact?
Absolutely. All in
And we
favor?
wouldn't have number 4 in this one, would we? I mean, we're not, the number 4 condition would not go with the first one? Or,
Yes, 7 conditions would go with each of the variances.
they would, okay.
So we have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor, any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? The first one is approved. The second one, allowing the establishment, by the way, that's approved with the conditions that has been set forth by the staff. The second one, allowing the establishment of a feedlot within the Agriculture Resource Conservation District and the Shoreland Natural Feature Overlay District pursuant to Chapter 8.5.1.2 of the Winona County zoning ordinance. This is a feedlot that has been proposed for 10 animal units.
And I just have a question on how do the rest of you feel about 10 or reducing it, or, do you think 10 is, I'm to have concerns, being sure.
Go ahead, Eric.
It might be appropriate to add, that might be one question that the petitioners might want to touch on, what their long-term perspective is in use. Because it's been a little while since I've had that conversation, and it might be good just to hear what their.
The chair will ask one of the petitioners to speak to that. How many animal units, or what are you exactly thinking there as of today?
Or how you feel about a lower threshold, or would it work for you?
State your name, please.
Christy Mass.
Okay,
And that's still what we were kind of planning on, is what Eric said, is,
10.
10 animal units. Maybe 4 horses and some goats, some lambs or sheep or whatever.
All right.
So anything lower than 10 would change your thinking?
Yeah, probably.
10? Okay, about what you'd want to do, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. 10 is pretty minimal.
Yeah, I'm just,
We don't
the
want-
shoreland, the whole water thing's kind
Our
of my thing.
feedlot officer's only got 10 fingers, right? I mean, that could get, no, just kidding.
She's got those toes, doesn't she?
Any other discussion on number 2? And I'll read it again. The establishment of a feedlot within the Ag Resource Conservation District and the Shoreland District not to exceed 10 animal units is what I was, it's in our conditions,
7 particularly relates to that.
particularly number 7.
Number 4.
Yeah, there's gonna be some plan for the manure and all that, and that's, these folks probably been in ag before, they know how to deal with that stuff. Anyway, are we ready to vote on number 2?
Motion to approve
Motion to approve by Phil,
With conditions?
with conditions
with
and
conditions,
fact-finding.
not 7 conditions
And fact-finding.
and fact-finding.
I'll second it.
Second by Margaret. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. The petition is approved. And, Mr. Mast, was it? Your petition is approved, but I do have to read this. Just hang on. All decisions by the Board of Adjustment in granting variances or in hearing appeals from any administrative order, requirement, decision, or determination shall be final, except that any aggrieved person or persons or any department, board, or commission of the jurisdiction of the state shall have the right to appeal within 30 days after receipt of the notice of the decision to the district court in the county in which the land is located on questions of law and fact. Any party that would like to submit an appeal to the decision just rendered at the public hearing must do so in district court. The planning department is not responsible for filing the appeal. Now, should we read the 7, or do we need not to?
She had it, right? We, as conditions, adding conditions was fine. You don't need,
Are in the findings that you just adopted.
Okay. So therefore, staff, or the Mass might want to be perfectly safe, wait 30 days in case somebody would want to challenge this, but I don't think that's the case, but otherwise.
the archaeological
They were-
study.
All they add is that the applicants do have to add the conditional use permits tonight to the planning
Yes.
commission.
Sure.
And then the county board would actually get final approval. So there is that.
You got a couple more steps then. But for now, you're good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Get to do that twice.